Give me the prompt again. We got to get warmed up here.
I'm here with Susan Chapman.
I am.
You're saying that?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Phil Schrader. I'm here with Susan Chapman and Yuliana Lopez of Culture Curated.
Hey, Phil.
Hey, Phil.
We're going to talk about culture and people analytics. All right. So first question, what is Culture Curated?
Culture Curated is an HR consulting firm that provides tailored people solutions. We work with companies of any size.
All right. So let's break that down a little bit. So tell me a little bit about why did you decide to do the crazy thing of going off and starting a consulting company around culture?
Simply put, culture is the values, beliefs, and norms that impact how people interact with each other, the way decisions are made, and the work that is done. And so when you take that into account and you realize how impactful culture is, it really is a competitive advantage for any company. So when we were looking at how can we provide companies with something that's going to give them a competitive advantage, knowing our background in HR, we felt that that was the best way to move forward was let's work on improving and shifting companies' culture.
We think of culture as just the balancing out the numbers, being nice enough, to the workforce sort of thing, like more of the soft things. But you talk about it very much as performance, culture, competitive advantage. Tell me a little bit more about that. How do all those ideas come together?
I think as HR professionals, we all have ideas of what the culture issues are or where we need to work on specific things, but it's a gut instinct. It's years of experience. It's looking at things after it happens. If you have the data together, you can move on things much faster and start testing things.
Yuli, what was an example of doing that? What was one of the things you tested?
I remember that situation. We had a high level of turnover. We had about 50% turnover. And we just had anecdotes, just a gut instinct of maybe people are dropping before they even finish their training period. Through that, we were still able to gain some knowledge, which is critical because we then realized, yes, our training program does need to be revamped. We also need to provide more support because people are saying they're not getting the support they need, they're not getting the check-ins they need. And so we created some positions that were called training ambassadors. So it was a whole new robust program around how to help new hires feel more welcomed when they started, but then also have the tools to actually gain the knowledge for them to do the job that they were hired to do. Now, like I said, that took a couple of weeks of just gathering some data and a lot of work. When one model was introduced, and I want to go ahead and share this because it was great for me as an HR business partner to no longer chase the data, but to shift my focus from chasing data to drawing insights, which allowed me to just have decisions that were at a much faster speed. So the speed at which I was able to then provide solutions was impactful for me as an HR professional and also made an impact on the organization.
So if you are one of those HR VPs and you have access to some data, where do you look first to get a sense of where culture is at and how you might improve it? Is it turnover rate? Is it something else?
So knowing that culture is going to be your values, your core beliefs, but then the beliefs, norms, and the way that people interact with each other, you can go about it many different ways. It could be, you could be collecting information from a focus group. It could be surveys that are what you're really trying to get to is the sentiment. How do people really believe? And through that, you may have some questions that are really around if an organization is one that values innovation. You're going to center your questions around, are people able to share ideas? If you find out through that sentiment and that people actually believe differently, then that would point to you have a discrepancy in what your values are and what people are actually, the way that they're caring about and doing the job. So you would be able to see your culture is not really aligned to the way that people are interacting with each other and behaving.
If you're looking at the data season, is there a way to see if culture is going really well? Or is there a way to see that culture is going really badly?
That's a great question, Phil. I think the most common one is obviously going to be looking at turnover, right? That is after the fact. That's not necessarily preventative, but it is going to give you an idea of where there's some issues. And the timing of that turnover is going to give you some insights as to what might be the cause. If it's very early on before they complete their training, maybe the training is inadequate. If it's much later on, maybe it's promotional opportunities. So it really just depends on the type of position you're looking at and at the point in time that the turnover tends to happen. So most organizations look at attendance rates for their hourly groups. They look at it as a collective and an overall attendance rate versus looking at individuals' attendance rates to see what's going well, what's not going well. Maybe we need to have a conversation with someone and figure out what's going on in life that we might need to help them with.
What about tools like surveys? Are those effective in measuring culture, or do employees tend to just say whatever they want to say on them?
I think you have to look at both sides of it. You need to know how people feel, what they're thinking, but then what their actions are equally as important. I don't think you can do one without the other. I think they're both very relevant. I think it's dangerous just to assume that the survey is the full picture of the story. And I think it's dangerous just to assume the data is the full picture of the story.
Right. You
Sure.
need the context of both because you do need a good mix of some qualitative and quantitative data. And while you can look at some of the data there for absenteeism, turnover that happened after the fact, if you do collect some information through interviews or surveys, you'll be able to then pick up more on the context and trends that are happening so that you could overlay both and be able to see more of the bigger picture.
I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. You have so much to offer around HR, around analytics, around culture. So how should people reach out?
People can email us. You'll see the email below, and we're happy to have a conversation.